Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen joining us from different parts of the world, and welcome to this special webinar on US-Africa relations in the Biden administration. This is being organized by the Nkafu Policy Institute, which is a think tank at the Denis and Foretia Foundation. Moderating today's session is Dr. Denis Foretia, who is Executive Chairman of the Nkafu Policy Institute and co-chair of the Denis and Foretia Foundation. Just a quick reminder that we have a Q&A box below where you can send your questions to panelists, and we also have a chat box that can allow you interact and chat with our panelists and attendees. Over to you, Dr. Foretia.
Thank you very much, Ansel, for that, and welcome to everyone. My name is Denis Foretia. I really appreciate you all joining us today, and want to thank our panelists for our experts on our U.S.-Africa policy for joining us. The Biden administration is actually just the third week in office right now, and there is great excitement, I would say hope, that the U.S.-Africa relationship would be resetted in some way, form or shape. This is really coming after the last 4 years of the Trump administration, where many would argue the relationship was pretty much a footnote, that Africa was maybe used as in the past, where it was a pawn between great power competition. And it became very important for us with the new administration for us to bring experts with great knowledge as to how the US operates and also what happens on the ground, to begin to look at what the key pillars, the main pillars of a potential US engagement or re-engagement with Africa could look like, and some of the areas where we should start looking to focus into. So today I'm joined by three great panelists with great insights into US-Africa relations. We have Melvin Foote. Melvin Foote has been in DC for a very long time. I'm saying, close to over 3 decades in DC. He is the founder and president and chief executive officer of Constituency for Africa, which pretty much works across the continent and builds the relationship between the continent and Africa. We are also joined by Riva Levinson, who is well known in DC and pretty much outside, having engaged across the world. And as of 2006, Riva started KRL International, which really works on the continent, has worked with many presidents on the continent. One of our real major engagements has been with the president of Liberia, Madam Shirley Johnson, really working closely with her through, even before she was president and throughout her presidency. Lastly, we have Charles Kojo Van Dyke, who is joining us from Accra. Charles is the head of capacity development at WACSI, the West African Civil Society Institute, which is based in Accra, but works across the West Africa region. Charles brings a lot of experience in governance and civil society sector across Africa in general. So we are very excited about this conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this. So let's get started. Mel, you've been in DC and working on Africa policies since at least the Clinton administration, and you've seen everything in the last 4 years. And I followed you on Twitter and on Facebook. There seems to be some excitement coming from you regarding what US-Africa policy could be in the next 4 years. In a few minutes, can you give us a brief assessment of your overview of this relationship as it stands today, and slightly where you think it could go?
Well, the U.S. Has always been interested in Africa. We have a long, standing policy toward Africa. And I would say, for the most part, it's been bipartisan. It's not about just Democrats or Republicans. But I go back really since '84 when I came to Washington. And I can say that I've seen a lot. All the major issues concerning Africa I've been involved in it, be it AGOA, be it PEPFAR, be it the Rwanda genocide. I've had my fingers on it. The last 4 years have been a real challenge for all of us, especially for those of us who follow Africa. It's been tough on African Americans. It's been tough on African immigrants. It's been tough on everybody who's concerned about, Africa. I've seen the U.S. diplomatic corps shrink dramatically under Trump. We've been lobbying really since Clinton to make sure the Assistant Secretary for Africa was an African American, and we were successful with one exception, two exceptions. One was Walter Kansteiner in the Bush administration, but at the same time, Colin Powell was Secretary of State and Condoleezza Rice were National Security Advisor, so I couldn't say nothing about that. And then during the Trump administration, Tibor Nagy was the Assistant Secretary, and we've seen the numbers of African Americans as diplomats shrink to about 1 or 2 for the whole continent. And so we have a lot of building to do. Trump labeled Africa as S-hole countries when he first got into office and said they're not worthy of anything. And that set the tone for the U.S. relationship with Africa these past 4 years. So we have a lot of building to do. I'm very optimistic about the Biden administration. I think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have selected really great people to be part of his cabinet. We're waiting to see who the Assistant Secretary for Africa will be. I'm lobbying again for that to be an American of African descent. But I'm optimistic. I think you're going to see a complete change of tone from the U.S. toward Africa. I think the Biden administration is going to be engaged in efforts to vaccinate the continent, is going to be heavily involved in efforts to strengthen the continental free trade zone. So I'm optimistic that the new administration is going to have a very proactive policy toward Africa.
Well, thank you very much, Mel, for that. Charles, let me come to you. Let me go to Accra. On the ground. Well, what is your view? What is your sense as to where this relationship, stands, and potentially where it could go?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Dennis. I mean, some of the things I would say will just re-echo what Mel has focused on. The general posture for the past 4 years towards Africa, has been characterized by disinterest and sometimes disdain. And Mel mentioned the infamous characterization by the president himself, the former president himself. So for us, there's a lot of expectations from this new administration. And I was very much encouraged just over the weekend following the African Union summit when President Biden stated that, the US is now ready to partner based on civility, a certain certainty, and a certain mutual respect. And so, yes, Africans expect a lot more from this administration. They expect an administration that is going to work with them and go back to an approach that is based on alliance building and more collaborative, something that we are more familiar with, the multilateral kind of engagement, right? But I also want to state that, as a person who is very much passionate about youth opportunities, just because of the size of the youth and size and the potential in Africa, and then also trade and investment in Africa, I am hoping that this administration consolidates the gains that it's made from some really amazing policies and programs that have been implemented over the years. So, for example, Trump's administration's Prosper Africa, we're hoping that Biden continues to support that. The Build Act that brought the International Development Finance Corporation, we're hoping that Biden supports that. We hope there'll be more investments into the Feed the Future, which was kind of relegated to the background. The Power Africa and the Yali initiative. So these are all initiatives that Africans are hoping, especially young Africans, that there'll be a kind of an injection into these initiatives. Another concern in Africa is the vehicle that has been supporting a lot of these programs seem to have, experienced major budget cuts. That is the United States Agency for International Development. We're hoping that this administration will look at that vehicle and see how, if it needs reform, to go ahead and reform it, but also re-inject some much needed resources to ensure that the partnership with Africa is really substantial.
Yes, no, you've put a lot of stuff on the table, which is great. A lot of consolidating a lot of the gains from Prosper Africa, the Build Act, Feed the Future to be reinvested in, budget for USAID. Riva, you have been very involved with transition in countries in transition. And not just Liberia, but key stakeholders across many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. As of today, how do you see where we are right now? Hopeful or not so much?
Hey Dennis, I'm hopeful, and I think what I'd like to do is just build on the foundation that Mel and Charles established in terms of going from Trump to Biden, and also looking forward in terms of the programs to build on. So in preparation, Dennis, for this conversation, I was reaching out to my friends in the administration. I'm like, well, what can I say today on this call to give a demonstration of where we're going? And I'm going to pivot on a comment that you said, that it was a footnote for Donald Trump Africa, or maybe a theater for US, China, US, Russia, the great competitor play. But I think the Biden administration, and I think Mel will affirm this, wants to make sure that this is not the case, that it's not a footnote, that it's a fundamental priority of national security for the US, and for a number of reasons. So my contact at State gave me 8 things, and they said in 3 weeks, this administration, the Biden administration, has done more for Africa than was done in 4 years. And Mel, I think you're going to shake your head, but I'm going to read these off to you, so excuse my divert. So one is Biden's very well-received statement at the AU. Charles, you mentioned that, agreeing to support Kanja Awila, the Nigerian American, to lead the WTO, rejoining the WHO, contributing $4 billion to COVAX Gavi for vaccines, again, something that Mel wrote, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, which is critical to African countries suffering climate change, lifting the Muslim ban, reinstating a robust refugee program, which is going to impact Africa, and reinstating the immigrant visa processing. And since that came through, I got another email saying that they were rejoining the Human Rights Commission. So I think that there's a keen interest. Well, first of all, Dennis, that this forum is taking place, and somebody wanted to empower me with that information. So I think that's significant. Let me pivot real quickly to Charles, because I'd like to respond on what Charles said. I think that the Trump administration did not give Africa the respect it was due as a continent of young people, of leaders, of innovation. But there were a few things that happened that were positive, like the Prosper Africa initiative, largely driven by the institution. And as Charles said, the Build Act, which is the establishment of the first US Development Finance Corporation. So those are things I think everybody is advocating for. But for me, I put a couple more things on the table and turn it back to you. One is debt, that the continent is now drowning in debt. It does not have the ability to, does not have the ability to put a $1.9 trillion stimulus in place. There has to be a global response to debt. The other, of course, is health security and vaccines. That's something that has to happen as well. And then, Charles, this is to your point, and I would say that it is a critical conversation for the young people, is democracy, is that democracy had a hard hit during COVID and a hard hit over these past 4 years. Many would say a step backwards, and leaders trying to legitimize elections for their power purposes and not for democracy. So those are the things I'd put on the table. A lot to digest. And sorry, I got to turn my phone off. Over.
Well, no, thanks, Riva, for that. In fact, I mean, it was very great to see the support, from President Biden of Dr. Okonjo, as well as candidacy for WTO Director General. and a lot of the other 7 things that you mentioned, which have gone in that direction. Now, Mel, as the administration gets out of the gate, Riva has already put some 8 things or so that have been done, and we are still at least at the NSC, at the National Security Council, we do have Dana Banks as the Africa lead at the NSC. What are some of the other individuals or nominations that have come forward from the Biden administration that give you a sense as to how they are going to approach Africa?
Well, I don't know the new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, but I've done research on him, and I talked to other people who do know him, and everybody tells me he's very good. Everybody telling me he's very balanced, and that's important. I mean, the Secretary of State sets the tone for it. I'm also excited about the Paris Climate Agreement. Africa has really been hit by climate change issues. And, people don't really associate it with it, but a lot of the problems with the carbon in the atmosphere and so forth, we're seeing cyclones in Mozambique and Southern Africa. We're seeing flooding all over the place. We're seeing locust infestation. So the climate issue is hitting Africa perhaps harder than any other region in the world. The Caribbean might argue with that. And it's hitting here in the United States. We just saw and so we're going to have to take this stuff seriously. My problem is I've been in Washington too long, really, long enough to say that a lot of times things don't change. The talk changes. We get a lot of talk, and sure enough, the Biden administration sounds good. And I voted for them, and I'm supporting them. But I would say at the same time, the diaspora, especially here in the United States, got a job to do. If we don't press for some of this stuff, I'm sure it's going to end up being a lot of talk and not a lot of action. Now, the Africans got to do their part also. And I think, we talked about next generation of young people. The democracy took a tremendous hit in Africa. And I'm looking at Cameroon, I'm looking at Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, across the continent. We're seeing, Brazzaville. We're seeing presidents deciding that their constitution don't mean anything. But we got a lot of work to do to press. The U.S. government is going to be tied up with COVID-19 response in the U.S. really for the next 6 months or so. I don't expect any major initiative coming from the U.S. toward anywhere except putting needles in the arms of Americans to get us vaccinated. So I know when Obama came to power, all of the Africans thought that, the brother's here now, where's the money? Let's pour them in. And Obama had to deal with getting the U.S. economy going again. We were bankrupt. And I wrote a paper for Obama. They asked me what could he do to buy some time? And I recommended that he don't focus on Mugabe and Biya and Bashir, that he focus on the young leaders coming up in Africa. That became Yali. And I agree with Charles. To me, that's the most significant program ever from the U.S. government. I'm a former Peace Corps volunteer, and everybody say the Peace Corps is this, Peace Corps is that, but it's nothing compared to Yali, where we empower the next generation. But I think the big challenge for me is how do we get the diaspora, African Americans and other Americans of African descent, African immigrants, how do we get us on the same page so that we can press for a strong U.S. policy toward Africa? We can press for trade and investment with the continent. I think if there's going to be any improvement in U.S. relationship with Africa, it's going to have to be driven by the diaspora here in the United States.
Yes, thanks, Mel. And Charles, Mel has mentioned a lot about what the diaspora needs to do, but also highlighted what Africans themselves need to do. Is there a sense from your reading that Africans as a whole, as a continent, but maybe country specific, have a clear idea as to how they want this relationship with the U.S. administration to be? What are their policy priority areas or so that they've articulated or are looking to articulate, and areas where they are looking to engage?
Yeah, I think to a large extent there's been some indications of where Africa is going. I mean, the immediate issue that Africans are faced with is the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, the health issue, it's wreaking havoc, but more importantly, the impact on African economies. And so the issue of vaccines has become quite important discussion in Africa, especially the administration's support for global efforts for equitable access and distribution of these vaccines. So for the Biden administration to join the COVAX program, I mean, Africans saw that as a healthy step in the right direction to getting these universal vaccines. But then there's also the economic issue, and Riva mentioned this. Most of our economies are probably in recession or going into recession. And this has a huge impact in terms of poverty and inequality, right? So for me, when we are talking about low-hanging fruits, we need to look at what can be done. What is the plan to work with the US to cultivate more jobs for the millions of young people that are in this country, that are in this continent, sorry. And so one of the things that you've seen is a step towards improving trade within Africa. So there's been the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And I think what African countries are hoping is that this administration will support this agreement, and an agreement such as this will then come to replace a non-reciprocal kind of arrangement like the AGOA. And these are things that Africans are looking towards. Over.
Yes, Charles, thank you. I mean, there've been a lot, Riva, that has been, laid on the table by Mel and Charles. So I want you to pick and choose, where to go there. But I also want, you to dive into the whole governance and democracy apparatus. We've talked about the democratic recession during the last 4 years of the Trump, during the 4 years of the Trump administration. And there seems to be some hope that, there'll be a more focused U.S. engagement on maybe democracy promotion, or if we were to extend the policy towards security assistance or so. Can you touch on some of this?
Absolutely. Let me respond one thing to what Mel said, and then to Charles, and then Dennis, I'm going to answer your question. So one of the things that Mel said that I much appreciate, which is he said that it's really easy to change tone and really easy to talk, but the proof is in what's actually done. And so I'm completely there with Mel. I think the diaspora has a critical role, but I think people who have advocated for Africa and spent time on the continent, and the Africans themselves have a role to play in helping shape policy. So I think that's, that's one. With respect to what Charles said on these issue of debt, it's not only a recession, but it's also a recession with no point of return. If you can't vaccinate your people, and you're dealing with the UK variant, which is more infectious, but now the South African variant, which we're being told that AstraZeneca can't even prevent mild to moderate response. And so this idea of vaccination and vaccination working together globally is going to be critical to recovery. Fourth point, I think I'm counting right, Dennis, which is that one of the things that the Trump administration refused to do was not to support what's called SDRs from the IMF. This is special drawing rights that enable countries to be able to have liquidity in times of crisis. And that is going to be a critical aspect to dealing with some of the debt. Janet Yellen has said that she's considering, or the administration is considering doing that. As we look forward, as Mel said, right now it's all about COVID and needles in the arms, but it's also about economic recovery, economic sustainability. They have to move hand in hand. We don't need a debate about whether a mask putting on opens, keeps your economy shut or not. It's a singular conversation. And finally, to my point, I'm watching your comments come across. I'm also trying to respond to the comments. As far as democracy and governance, let's all accept that we were not a model, the United States, for the past 4 years, and did not echo those priorities that are driven by a young population. In a column that I wrote for the Wilson Center last year, I talked about the most important thing that happened on the continent last year, and I talked about the rise of the activist generation. I talked about NSARS, I talked about what happened in Sudan, responses in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, etc. And that is a voice in a conversation that needs to be fully considered as the Biden administration moves forward to discuss its policies. And I'm encouraged that Gregory Meeks, who is now the chairman of the House Africa Subcommittee, and in his first column as chairman, did not talk about China or Russia. He talked about Africa. And one of the things he talked about was the agency of Africans and being able to respond to the needs of the youth. And so one of the challenges I put on the table is, how do you, as a new administration that's going to have credibility and power and resources, empower those individuals, those young people, that civil society that has not been successful in having their voices heard within their own government, and why the governments themselves use political processes and electoral processes as a way to manipulate and get PR to assume some type of legitimacy against what's not their people, but to the world. So there's a disconnect of legitimate world, legitimate people. How do you pull that together? Small challenge. I'm sure Mel can figure it out as well as Charles. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, Riva, but let me push you a little bit. I appreciate that, because over, as you said in your column for the Wilson Center, you mentioned this arrested, democratic motions in sub-Saharan Africa. You mentioned, Cote d'Ivoire. There is the Sahel. There is Mali. There is Guinea. And there is the whole, third termism that is
Uganda.
Yes,
Tanzania.
all of that. There's Cameroon, there is Ethiopia now. So there are all these countries that many would argue that the U.S., even in the U.S. interest, it should be more forceful in not supporting some of these regimes. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. Again, I'm watching the comments come across, so I'm trying to be responsive. Listen, I agree with that. I think that, it's not, these institutions, these governments, these institutions in Africa need to be representative of their people, not protective of an elite status quo. And as the US, as a country that's coming back to the continent after 4 years, very humble of what's happened over the Trump administration, and with humility, what's happened in our own country in terms of calls for racial injustice, we have to find the space and the way to empower those voices, and also to hold those governments accountable and not give them that legitimacy, not give them that participation, not give them that assistance. There has to be a squeeze because we have governments. I think I was listening to Chris Famunyo yesterday on another program. He talked about Teodoro Obiang has been in power for almost 40 years. And then you have in Cameroon, you have in Chad, you have in Congo Brazzaville, right? How can that be acceptable? How can that be acceptable in Uganda? So we can't solve it alone. What we have to do is figure out a way to empower those people who are fighting for democracy and living and dying every day in their own country. And we haven't been doing that. So over, Denis.
Yeah, so thank
over,
you,
Denis.
Riva. Mel, 30 plus years, doing this, traveling the continent, talking with and nudging some of these individuals, and very supportive, as you mentioned, of the Yali program. But to piggyback on the points Riva raised, how can they, or how should this administration approach some of these leaders? I mean, I know how should it do it? That's one. And then secondly, if you were to move forward and look at some of the security challenges across the continent, and give a few words as to how you think the administration could also approach that.
Well, the reality is the United States, which has historically been the bastion of democracy, is no longer that anymore. You know, what we saw happen on January the 6th here in Washington reminded me of Haiti or, you know, Cameroon or some of these other places. Democracy, we have to be careful about lecturing to Africa for sure, you know. And many of us who are Americans of African descent who came to this country, you know, we've been fighting for 400 years. And that fight has been largely ignored. Africans and Americans have seemed like we're halfway crazy. And so I think for the first time, Africans are seeing some synergy and some understanding with their brothers and sisters here in the United States. Now, I haven't said that the US is in a weak position to lecture Africa about anything. You know, can we tell a country they should not have a coup d'etat now? Should we tell a country that, you know, democracy the vote don't matter? We all have a hard time doing it. I think this is an optimum time for Africa to stand up. I'm looking forward to seeing the Africa Union. They just changed leadership. You know, Africa has made great progress over the last 20, 30 years. You know, people don't give Africa the due credit that it deserves. Now, sure, it has some fallback. Sure, it has a lot of issues. Part of the problem is the rest of the world don't treat Africa right. All we want from Africa is the diamonds, the oil, the coltan, the fish, the forestry. You know, we don't want the people. And we have made sure that Africa don't function, you know. And it goes back to colonialism and all this other stuff, which I'm not going to get into. So I think now is the time. Africa has formed the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which I think is a step in the right direction. I think Africa is interceding in Africa's problems in a positive kind of way. I think the next generation is standing up. All of these Yali types, I met 10,000 of them since the program's inception. And I haven't met one yet that I'm not impressed with. You know, I'm expecting Yali presidents to emerge in Africa. I'm expecting women to emerge in a big kind of way on the continent. We're seeing it in many countries. Rwanda, like 80% of the parliament is women. You know, in many other countries, women are standing up. I think that what we're finding out is that the next century is going to be Africa's century. And I think technology is going to move in our direction. I think that Africa is going to really identify positive ways to work with the diaspora. Last year was the year of return in Ghana. And, you know, the Ghanaians brought all kinds of star power to the continent for the first time. Many of these people for the first time getting to Africa, and they loved it, you know. And so I'm expecting more diaspora investment. I'm expecting the diaspora to really lobby for Africa in a big kind of way. We're your voice in Washington. Africa should look at the Constituency for Africa as its partner in Washington. We're fighting the battle for Africa here in Washington. You know, we love Africa and we love America. We're African Americans. But I think, you know, I think we're going to move in the right direction. We're moving in the right direction. The day of the dictator is gone. You know, I looked at the president of Cameroon other day. I think he's going for his 5th term now, 6th term. And the guy is 80-something years old. You know, I mean, God at some point is going to intercede and tell the dictators they got to go. And I'm expecting that Africa, the young people in Africa are going to stand up and do the right thing, and we're going to support them 100%.
Thanks, Mel. No, Charles.
Yeah.
Many have looked. Many continue to look to Ghana, you know, as you know, having undertaken the democratic transition much more successfully than many other, you know, sub-Saharan countries. And President Nana was just re-elected.
Yeah.
In a very highly contested election, but you know, very peaceful election overall. What is your sense as to what Africans, you know, want from this administration, and also on the issue of democracy promotion across you know, sub-Saharan Africa? And please touch a little bit about on the security aspect.
Yeah. So you know, yes, Ghana has been, you know, quoted as an example of, you know, of democratization, and yes, we have made progress over the years. But of course, we also have our own shortcomings. But the good thing is, I think the key to Ghana's success has been, you know, support for organizations that, you know, strengthen civic engagement in development and in governance. And I think it's about empowering people to realize their position and the importance of a government delivering for its people, and that has really helped strengthen Ghana's democracy. But of course, I would say in Africa, there are pockets of great examples, but they are just not sufficient good examples. And so over the year, you've seen that many governments have become quite, autocratic in the way they engage with their citizens. So you've seen that there's this whole, a lot of censorship, which is kind of unprecedented. There's been attack on journalists and bloggers, police brutality, etc. Right? So that has not been helpful for our democratic culture and the democratization process in Africa. But I'm still encouraged, and I like what Mel said, because there's a lot of young people who are now organizing from the grassroots level and at the national level, and even beyond countries, right? Organizing, creating movements to promote democracy, to defend human rights. So there's an awakening in Africa right now, and certain countries that have been mentioned, like Cameroon, like Uganda, it's just a matter of time that these countries turn, and the will of the people will come to its fore. But I think what is important is what we're looking from America is not, to be spoon-fed or to be given handouts, but we are looking for partnerships that will help strengthen institutions that will solidify our democracy. So we are talking about, institutions like the judiciary, like constitutional mandated bodies like anti-corruption institutions, civic organizations that work on governance, human rights, and social justice. Support for these institutions to keep on doing the work that they do. And of course, very important programs like the YALI. And the aspect of the YALI, which I think is extremely important, are the regional leadership centers that have been created in the various countries. And these centers have given an opportunity for young people to come and strengthen their leadership skills, their activism, their community engagement skills. And there are so many great stories of some of the work that these young people are doing, trying to push the envelope of change from the grassroots, because actually the change happens from the grassroots, and then it permeates into the national level. And I think this is the kind of support that Africans are looking forward to, and partnerships that Africans are looking forward to ensure that we really have a much more brighter future.
Yeah, so I think the real, what I'm hearing is an issue of, a real robust partnership is what is being sought after. Now, the Biden administration, is in office, and there are some hot conflicts around the continent. We have the Tigray region. Mel, you're very, very aware of this and have great experience in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian conflict, which is now at least 100 days, getting to 100 days of what has been termed a civil war, with a full blackout in the Tigray region. We have a Sahel, which has been, for the last maybe going over a decade now, has been a security mess, with the coup of August 18 in Mali, which took lots of folks by surprise. We've mentioned Cameroon. I see on the chat they're already talking about the Anglophone conflict, where the Anglophone regions is in open conflict with the central government. We've talked of Uganda, Museveni. From what is the security approach that, Mel, you think this administration would use to engage Africa and help, bring some of these conflicts to a halt, or get them to a negotiation table?
Well, one thing people fail to realize is that all the problems in the Sahel, all of the war that's going on in the Sahel is a result of the war on terror, the U.S. war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq. And sure enough, we defeated the terrorist Al-Qaeda and all of that. But what happened? The terrorists went south. Once Gaddafi fell in Libya, his stockpiles fell. They fell in the hands of terrorists, and we did not secure those weapons. So what happened to those weapons, the missiles, the guns? The terrorists got a hold to them, and they went south. They went to Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Chad, and these other front lines. And these countries were not willing, didn't have the capacity to combat these forces that wreak havoc. And so the U.S. response was, you need to spend more on your military. In other words, spend less on your schools, less on your health clinics, less on securing the people, and spend more on weapons. And of course, you should buy those weapons from the United States. A transactional sort of. So this is where we find these countries. The U.S. has got to find a way to strengthen security in the Sahel, and we should support all of the frontline states. And we're lobbying, going to press the Biden administration to do so. And that gets into training, it gets into equipping, it gets into support for the forces that are combating the war on terror. The war in Mali and Niger is the same war that we were fighting in the Middle East. And so, Africans weren't fighting that war, but now they're having to defend themselves. I think, the U.S. is going to support AFRICOM in its effort to strengthen security in Africa, but I don't see the U.S. taking the lead. I think, again, Africa Union, Africans have to show leadership here and then invite the U.S. to support it where it can. But I don't see the U.S. sending troops to battle Cameroon. I don't see us going there to fight the war. I don't see us going to putting troops on the ground in Africa other than advisors and this sort of thing. I like to see more leadership coming from the continent.
Yes, Riva, please. There's a lot. Let me let you come in.
Yeah, I wanna offer a little bit of a healthy debate, since I know that's good as we round out the hour there. I want to go back to something that Mel said, which I agree with, but not entirely, which is that obviously what happened on 6th January was a stain in the United States, but it did not take away what the US has represented over all of these years and through communism and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the building of democracy. And we are an imperfect union. And I was in Ghana, Charles, on 6th January. I was there for the inauguration of Nana Akufo-Addo. And I was speaking to people and listening. And one of the takeaways that people said to me was how the US institutions held. You know, that an individual man, Donald Trump, decided, I think we all can say, he went on a political self-destruct mission. We had thought that he was challenging the election to be relevant in 2024. He was not. It was really a strategy of the continuation of office. And what happened? People in Georgia voted the Republicans out. The Congress kept up with its mandate in terms of the Electoral College. The courts turned down the cases. The American people stood up. And so as I was sitting in Ghana, listening to this, for me, the comment was the institutions were stronger than an individual. And that's not the case in Africa. That's why you can have a Museveni or a Biya, or an Obiang, or name your poison at this point. And so the message that I was given, and this is from institutions, Charles, like those you work with in Ghana, is that that's what we need to do. We need to strengthen those institutions. We need to use the voice of the young people and help build their power and their institutions. So it's not that I disagree with Mel, I just have a different take on the same point. Second thing, different take on the same point, and Mel's my 30-year friend, so we're both aging ourselves, Mel, is that I believe that it's the problems in the Sahel and the problems of insecurity in Somalia and Ethiopia and everywhere else that the US in some ways may have contributed at the margin, but the US is not the contributor to those insecurities. It's not just Iraq and Afghanistan, it's also what happened in Syria and the wave of migration and what happened in Libya and that wave of migration. And one of the things that I've seen from AFRICOM since it was established in 2006, it's its ability to, quote, partner with US security forces and not only bring the capacities, but bring the respect of military to civilian institutions and those types of values. And so I think maybe we all agree that the US has tremendous tools at its disposal, that people want to see the US lead, not only with words, but with policies. And so I think what Mel is saying, and I'm totally there, is to get behind and define and how to make that count, whether it's the diaspora, whether it's the voices of the young people, whether it's Zimbabwe Lives Matter or End SARS, but how we can help define that conversation. And maybe one of the things the Biden administration needs to do is realize it doesn't have all the answers, right? And to go out there and talk to those institutions that have the ability to change on the continent and see how it can support them. Okay, over, Dennis.
Well, thank you very much. Now I think we are running late, but I'll read. There have been many questions that we got prior to this, and also on the chat and the Q&A here. So I'll read a few of them for you all to pick and choose which ones you want to address. One comes from Ndungu Wainana in Kenya. How would the Biden administration's strong support for free trade and democracy in Africa affect the relationship with Africa? That's from Wainana Ndungu. We have another one from Joycelyn Chakunte, who says, I am afraid there will be no US-Africa relations, only US-France-Africa or US-France-China-Africa relations. This is to talk about the great interest argument. So what is your take on that? One more from, I see, American fuel on African markets. What do we see on that situation? Not very clear. There is questions on how the new Biden administration is going to solve the crisis in Africa, especially in Cameroon with the Anglophone crisis. Because as a Cameroonian, I will evaluate the new policy according to their impact and challenges. That's from Severin Epo. Well, so let's touch on some of this, and then a little bit more on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and how this plays in Africa, in US-Africa relations. I'll have Charles, please go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Dennis. I don't know if you mind, I can hop into the African Continental Free Trade.
Sure.
Yeah, free trade agreement. I think this is a very important landmark deal that as Africans we've reached. Very, very important. And I believe that this is an agreement that will change the fortunes of this continent if there's commitment from all the countries that have ratified it. We're looking at a possibility of creating new cross-border value chains that are non-existent. It will encourage foreign investment, and it also insulates a lot of our economies from the global shocks, which is really helpful, right? The thing is, there's been some, talk about the Biden administration supporting the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I'm not too certain about that, but that's what the talk has been. But of course, the question now is, how is that going to play out with the AGOA arrangements? Because the current AGOA arrangements actually come to an end in 2025. And I'm hearing that they're going to be renegotiations. So what kind of how are these renegotiations going to be done? And how is the African Continental Free Trade going to feature here and to ensure that this agreement actually works? And to talk about low-hanging fruits, because you mentioned that before, about what are some of the quick gains. And I'm going back again to the youth. And the fact that in Africa now, and the statistics are there for all of us to see, there's an emerging technology startup market. It's huge. Technology has just been a major game changer. If you look at mobile phone penetration, if you look at what has happened within the COVID times and the engagement on the virtual space, there's a huge market for technology startup. What role can the US play in partnering with Africans who have some of the most brilliant ideas when it comes to tech products, especially tech for good, tech for social good, tech products that are designed to solve our poverty and inequality challenges? What are some of the challenges that, what are some of the, strategies that US can have to engage with the youth in this space? Because I believe that this is what I call a low-hanging fruit and a quick win for this administration. Over.
Thank you very much. Mel, let me get your thoughts on, I mean, there was a lot put out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on the table. Let me say that, I'm a non-political person per se. I work with whoever's in the White House. And the Trump administration approached me early on and asked me what ideal I had for the big ideal for Africa. And I came up with a concept, I called it Tech Africa. And I told Trump that he should take all the tech companies to Africa, put them in an airplane, take them all to Africa and link up with the African young people. But the bumper sticker would be Tech Africa. I think that gets into what, they didn't buy it. They sent the first lady to Africa, she put on a safari hat, and we all know what happened with that, nothing. My message to my colleagues on the phone here, on the call, is don't agonize, organize. It's very easy to get mad, but it's very difficult to get strategic and get organized to do something. I think that the US administration, by the way, my insiders in the White House are telling me that Kamala Harris is going to have the portfolio for Africa under her. That's a hot news item, but she doesn't know Africa. She does not know Africa. Her brother-in-law is Nigerian, but she has never been to Africa that I know, and she doesn't know it. But I think she's a quick learner. I'm expecting that she's going to be up on it quickly, and I think she's going to do a good job managing the portfolio. I think that I was on a call last week with the Congressional Black Caucus with the African Diplomatic Corps, and it was a fantastic call, and very few others who were allowed to be on that call. But the CBC, led by Congresswoman Karen Bass and Gregory Meeks, who is now the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, made a strong commitment for Africa. There were many other CBC members who were on the call, Barbara Lee, who's running one of the portfolios. They talked about a trip to Africa as soon as conditions with COVID-19 allow for. I'm expecting that trip to take place. I think it's going to be a very important signal that the Biden administration is on with Africa. I'm expecting Kamala Harris to go to Africa, perhaps on that same trip. We'll see how it play out. But I think that what I'm hearing is that the US is clearly engaging or re-engaging with Africa in a very positive, profound way. The new Defense Secretary is General Lloyd Austin, and he's an African-American. I'm looking forward to him going to Africa, and I'm looking forward to him sitting down with the defense secretaries on the continent to talk about security arrangements for the continent. So I'm actually bullish on it, but I'm just saying that I think that people have got to do something. It can't just be limited to I'm mad or I'm frustrated. I don't like beer. I don't like opium. You're going to have to get organized and do something to strengthen the infrastructure on the continent. And you'll find that there's a diaspora out here that's looking to engage with you and support you in that regard. And I think we could bring along the Biden administration in a positive way.
Thank you very much, Mel. Now, Riva, I don't know if you are as bullish as Mel seems to be, regarding these relations going forward. But I want your take on that, and also on some of this, quick gains that could be, gotten, some of these low-hanging fruits. I know earlier you mentioned some of the 8 things or so that the administration had already done, but as we round over, what are some of these quick gains that could be gotten in the next couple of months? Riva, you are muted.
Right. Okay, how much time do we have? Do we have 2 minutes?
2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, 2 to 5 minutes. Okay, well, I just want to hashtag the comment that Mel made. Don't agonize, organize. Well said, Mel. That'll be the hashtag that comes out of this event. Number 2 is the fact I had heard exactly what Mel said, that it looks like Kamala Harris may take the Africa portfolio. It doesn't matter whether she's been there or whether she's a specialist. She is a quick study, and she is passionate about women and women leadership, and her rise is symbolic. And that's an important conversation on Africa. She'll carry that with her to the continent about the importance of bringing in political outsiders, whether they're women or whether they're youth. So I think Mel made news with that. Go, Mel. Good stuff. I think in terms of initiatives, I think Mel nailed it, which is that you need to have an initiative that speaks to the time and speaks to the generation. And it's going to make a difference not only in empowering economic development, but empowering youth and youth political voices. So I'm voting, like Mel is, for something for technology for Africa, but not doing it at a overt PR level, bringing in all of the major companies, but actually using it as both an economic, entrepreneurial, and political tool for empowerment. Finally, quick wins. You know what? There's not going to be any quick wins unless we can deal with the health crisis and the economic crisis. And that's vaccine deployment, and that's, drowning in debt. And so if the Biden administration is going to put its money where its mouth is, beyond COVAX is important, but it is not the singular vehicle to get vaccines into Africa, because Africa has agency too to get its vaccines. It's also dealing with debt and looking at what's happening in this post-COVID climate, this commodity crash climate, and looking at almost a HIPC-like, the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative for Africa. Sorry. Final thing is responsibility of Africans to their people and to their institutions. And that's something that we have to figure out collectively, how we empower Africans to address that in their own country, because they do not have institutions like we did in Washington on 6 January that are going to protect them from somebody who decides the institutions don't matter. Over.
Thanks, Riva. Now I'll just get a lightning round, 1 minute each to just give final comments. Kojo and Charles, just some final thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really great conversation. I think what the COVID situation has done is just shown that, we are all connected, to the hip, really, and, our fates are bound together. There's been a lot of talk about the benefits of globalization for years. There's been a lot of talk about being collaborative, building alliances and partnerships. This time we can't fake it to make it. We really have to build real partnerships based on mutual respect and based on the fact that it's not only in one place that there are ideas. It's not only in one place where things work. Even though in Africa we've had challenges, there have been really great pockets of excellence that I believe that even Americans can learn from. So I think the exchange should be reciprocal. That's what should change with this administration. A reciprocal exchange of learning, a reciprocal exchange of trade and investment that is based on fairness and justice. And I think that is where we should be heading to. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thanks, Charles. Mel?
I just really want to thank you, Dennis, and the foundation for hosting this conversation. I think it's been timely. I think it's been on point, and I felt that it was very thorough. The thing about COVID-19, and it's been a dreadful year for all of us. I just got my vaccination last week, so I feel a little bit better about it. But I think it has enabled us to have these kind of conversations, where in the past, I would have had to get on an airplane and fly to Accra, which was not a bad thing, or somewhere, and but it costs a lot of money to do it, the timing of it. But here we are having this intercontinental conversation around Africa. It is only because we've been forced to use technology to get to it. I think there's a lot of gist for it. I hope that you share the tape from this broadly, and I'll make sure the administration gets it. One thing I do good is I share information. And I don't claim to be the sharpest knife in the drawer or the brightest bulb on the tree, but I do have access to all the bright bulbs and the sharp knives. So I would make sure that opinion makers and decision makers here in Washington and throughout the diaspora are are briefed by this conversation. So I want to just thank you for putting this together. And I thank the panelists, my colleagues on the panel for making this happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mel. Riva?
Well, I was going to applaud Charles because I thought his speech was well said. He talked about reciprocity. He said, don't fake it to make it. And then I go back to what Mel said about don't agonize, organize. I do think that this conversation, Dennis, exceeded my expectations, not only in making news, but in really putting some specific initiatives before the Biden administration. And I am very optimistic and hopeful because we know the people who are involved. And my final shout out would be, and Mel would agree with this, is that we have now a US ambassador designate to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, who will be confirmed, will be confirmed by the Senate after the impeachment saga, but that's also part of our recent history, who her whole professional foundation was in Africa. I knew her when she was 4 years in Liberia. And let's not underestimate the ability to have a cabinet secretary whose foundational work was in Africa, communicating with the president and the vice president, the secretary of state, the US trade representative, the secretary of defense. So I think we all have a role to play. And again, it was a privilege to be part of this conversation. And Mel, you are the brightest light and you are the sharpest knife. So don't take away anything from yourself.
Well, Riva, thank you, Mel. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate your participation. I think this has been really a pleasant conversation. I echo everything you all have said. I think these conversations need to continue. Appreciate all the time you put into this and your contributions here. I want to thank everyone who is watching. These conversations continue, and we'll be sharing the video coming out of this, and hopefully, as Mel said, I agree with him 100%. We have to hold the administration accountable to ensure that all the talk doesn't remain talk, but they actually translate into actions. So with that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and please stay safe and have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye. Take care.
You.
Bye.